Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun
Mukham karadi bachalam pangam langai tegirim jat kripata maham bandeg Shri Gurum dinatarinum Omagyana timananda sagyana jan shalakaya chukshushan manidangyan tasma Shri Gurave namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deva Gaudavani Pracharne Nivada Visheshashan Navadi Prashtata Deshtarne. Welcome to Unit 1 of Bhakti Sastri Online. In Unit 1, we'll be studying Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapters 1 to 6, translation and commentary by ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Abhaycharan Adabinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In the introduction to Bhagavad Gita as it is, Prabhupada has included Sri Adi Sankha Acharya's Gita Mahatmya. Let's chant a few verses from the Gita Mahatmya. Mala niramochanam pungshang jalashnanam dine dine sakrit gitamrita snanam shangshara malanashanam. One may cleanse himself daily by taking a bath in water, but if one takes a bath even once in the sacred Ganges water of Bhagavad Gita, for him the dirt of material life is altogether vanquished. Gita sugita kartabhya kimyanya shastra vishtarai yashvayam paramanavasham mukapadma vinishrita. One need only attentively and regularly hear and read Bhagavad Gita. One need not read any other Vedic literature, because it is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic literatures. Sarvopani shirogabo dogdha gopalanandana parthavatsa sudhir bhokta dugdam gita amritam mahat. The Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, the essence of all the Upanishads, is just like a cow. And Lord Krishna, who is famous as a cowherd boy, is milking this cow. Arjuna is just like a calf, and learned scholars and pure devotees are to drink the nectarian milk of Bhagavad Gita. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Let's take a closer look at the preface to Bhagavad Gita as it is. Prabhupada wrote this preface in 1971, in May, in Sydney, Australia. And in the preface, Prabhupada reveals some very significant points which shed light on his mission, specifically in providing Bhagavad Gita as it is, and his general mission of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, and the specific role that Bhagavad Gita plays in that overall mission of Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada's explaining that his purpose is to present the will of Krishna as it is, and therefore Prabhupada subtitles his Bhagavad Gita with the subtitle as it is, indicating that, as Prabhupada writes on the top of page X1X in the preface, our only purpose is to present Bhagavad Gita as it is, in order to guide the conditioned student for the same purpose for which Krishna descends to this planet once in a day. What is that purpose? That's very clearly explained by Prabhupada also here in the preface over the page, that the highest perfection of life is, instead of satisfying one's own personal material senses, he has to satisfy the senses of the Lord. That's Krishna consciousness, devotional service to Krishna. And the Lord wants this, he demands this. Mam eka sharana, surrender unto me. One has to understand the central point of Bhagavad Gita, and our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching the central point of the Bhagavad Gita, because we're not polluting the theme. So this is very predominant component, aspect, angle of Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, that is very, very much in alignment with Krishna's original purpose of coming to reclaim the fallen conditioned souls and speaking Bhagavad Gita for that purpose. And Prabhupada is explaining that he's presented Bhagavad Gita particularly in line with this intention of Krishna to induce the forgetful conditioned souls to revive their relationship, loving relationship with Krishna as his eternal servants. To authorize the activities of ISKCON. Actually, at the time, in the early 1970s, ISKCON was still a very new movement and was not known so much in the Western world. It was not even understood as being a very ancient spiritual process. And therefore, the Bhagavad Gita plays such a significant contribution in authorizing the activities of the Krishna consciousness movement based on statements Krishna makes. Satatam kirtayanto mam. The devotees are always chanting Krishna's names. Manmana, they're always thinking of Krishna. Bhavamad bhakta mam namaskuru, worship me, bow down to me. All of the activities of the Krishna consciousness movement, we see their roots, we can see their authority in the statements that Krishna makes in the Bhagavad Gita. Patram pushpam palam toyam yomi bhakta prayachati, you offer me fruits, leaves, flower, water, I will accept it. Deity worship. Acharya upashanam, accepting a spiritual master. Evam paramparam prabdam, I can be attained through the parampara system. So many of these important principles of Bhagavad Gita which authorize, which give evidence, the Shastric evidence to the day-to-day activities that we're performing in the Krishna consciousness movement. In this way, the book authorizes our activities, and as Prabhupada mentions here, in order to establish the Krishna conscious movement more soundly and progressively. Our Krishna consciousness movement is genuine, historically authorized, and natural and transcendental due to it being based on Bhagavad Gita as it is. To create a whole society which follows Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada's explaining that anyone, this is toward the end of the preface, anyone seriously interested in deriving benefit by studying Bhagavad Gita must take help from the Krishna consciousness movement for practical understanding. So Prabhupada labored so much personally, took so much sacrifice to provide the books. Late at night when we were all sleeping, Prabhupada was writing his books so that humanity at large could have access to his legacy for generations to come. But the books in themselves also require, as Prabhupada mentions here, for practical understanding, the direct guidance, one must take help from the Krishna consciousness movement. So providing a society of devotees who follow the teachings of Bhagavad Gita is an aspect of Prabhupada's mission that is revealed in the preface, and to teach the whole world. In fact, Prabhupada is very much convinced about the importance of Bhagavad Gita as being the only solution to the world's problems of modern humanity. Prabhupada comments in the middle of page X1X that Krishna consciousness movement is essential to human society. Everyone should have, Prabhupada is very emphatic here. He's repeating the word 3 times, everyone. It's a poetic style to show emphasis. Everyone should know how God or Krishna is great. Everyone should know the factual position of the living entity. Everyone should know the living entity is eternal, a servant, and that unless one serves Krishna, he serves an illusion. Also, Prabhupada's touching on here, Sambandha Gyan, the relationship that we have with the Lord, the relationship we have with the material nature, the relationship the material nature has with the Lord. And these topics are all elaborately described in Bhagavad Gita. And to teach, as Prabhupada mentions, this knowledge constitutes a great science, and each and every living being has to hear it for his own interest. So Prabhupada is very much convinced about the importance of his mission. He's very much convinced and determined about the value of Bhagavad Gita and making the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita available to all humanity, and Prabhupada has accepted this as his mission in life. As Prabhupada mentions toward the end of the preface, our Krishna consciousness movement is teaching the whole world this central point. And this, you could say, is like an essential mission statement of the Krishna consciousness movement. Srila Prabhupada ki. And Prabhupada's mood also in the preface also is very significant, very inspirational. He's very much convinced about the importance of Bhagavad Gita. He's very much determined to spread the teachings of Bhagavad Gita all over the world. He has great compassion and great humility, giving all credit to his spiritual master. And Prabhupada's also very uncompromising and not very much appreciative of the non-devotional commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, and warns us very, very carefully, but we should be very careful to avoid such non-devotional commentaries. And these are all some important aspects of the preface which we can consider. We won't have an elaborate discussion of the introduction, but we will refer to the introduction on specific occasions when some relevant topics appear in later texts. So let us begin our study of Bhagavad Gita as it is, beginning with chapter 1, text 1. Dhritarashtra uvacha dharmakshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsava mamaka pandavaschaiva kimakurvata sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do? Prabhupada's discussing the significance of the word Dharmakshetra in his purport. Dharmakshetra means literally the religious field, and it's significant. Prabhupada's commenting that Kurukshetra in itself is a place of religion because traditionally the Kaurava ruling kings would go to Kurukshetra and perform the different types of tapasya and other types of ceremonial sacrifices. So in that way, Kurukshetra itself was a holy place. And also it's Dharmakshetra because the Supreme Lord, the ultimate authority in Dharma, is appearing at this place, on this field, in order to establish the ultimate Dharma, the Param Dharma, the Sanatan Dharma of devotional service. So these very significant opening words of the Bhagavad Gita indicate the significance of the text to come, where Lord Krishna himself personally descends to the earth and he explains all the principles of Dharma. And that place is called Dharmakshetra, Kurukshetra. The analogy that Prabhupada gives in the purport is very interesting. Just like in the field, one has to uproot all of the unwanted weeds. So similarly, the influence of the holy place of Dharmakshetra will see that the unwanted creepers, Prabhupada explains, the unwanted plants like Dhritarashtra's son and Duryodhana and others would be wiped out. So this is all significant. So the title, Dharmakshetra, Kurukshetra. In verses 3 to 11, different aspects of Duryodhana's diplomacy are revealed. The word diplomacy actually is a Greek word, coming from the Greek word diplos, meaning something with two sides, like we have a diploma, meant a folded piece of paper with two sides. So diplomacy. And we're looking here, the opening verses of the Gita are describing the nature, the qualities, the character of Duryodhana, in that he's prepared to say anything in order to get alliance and have his agenda maintained and appreciated by his supporters. And he will say anything in order to ensure their support. So this type of, you could say, manipulative leadership is being indicated in the comments that he makes. We can analyze some of these comments. In text 3, Drupad putrena tavashishya dhimataha. He's referring to Drushtadumna in text 3. So rather than referring to Drushtadumna in that name, he's referring to him as Drupad Putra to incite Drona's feelings of animosity toward King Drupad. The history of Mahabharata explains that when Drona and Drupad were together in the Gurukul, they were friends. Even though Drona was the son of a very simple Brahmin and Drupad was the son of a king. So at one time, when they were young, Drupad said to Drona that when I grow up and I inherit the kingdom, I will give you half of the kingdom. So later, after departing from the Gurukul, they went their separate ways. Now, Drona's family members were experiencing some difficulty as a result of his simple lifestyle. And one time, his son Ashvatthama was actually crying for milk. And as they didn't have a cow, Drona was unable to give Ashvatthama milk. And the village boys, they actually got some rice powder, mixed it with water. And then they gave that to Ashvatthama. And Ashvatthama was drinking it and saying, oh, it's such nice milk. So seeing this, Drona's heart was so much melted with empathy for the condition of his family members that he thought he would go and see King Drupad and simply ask him for a cow. Upon arriving in the palace of King Drupad, Drona was actually insulted by Drupad. He wasn't respected, he wasn't appreciated. Drupad said that friendship only exists among equals, so you cannot consider yourself my friend being such an impoverished person. He didn't properly host Drona. Drona was accommodated in the outside barn, and in this way Drona was very much offended. And his intention was to train up the Kaurava princes, which he did, and the Pandava princes, and have them retaliate when requesting his dakshina, Guru dakshina, to bring them the Drupad. And Drona actually, he succeeded in this. So there was a great animosity between Drona and Draupad. Eventually, even though the Kaurava princes were unable to defeat Drupad, when Drona sent Arjuna and the 5 Pandavas, Arjuna, he defeated Drupad, he tied him up, he brought him before Drona. And this way, Drona punished Drupad, took half the kingdom. But Drupad was still very much upset, and he wanted to retaliate. He did a yagya. From the yagya of Drupad was born, first of all, Draupadi, the wife of the Pandavas, and Dristadumna. And Dristadumna, at the time of performing the yagya, he appeared from the sacrificial fire for the purpose of killing Drona. So here in the verse, Duryodhana, he is inciting these previous ill feelings that Drona had with Drupad, and referring to the general of the Kauravas' armies as Pandu Putra, Drupad Putra, and Tava Shishya, your disciple, Dhimataha. He's very intelligent now as he's standing opposing you on the Pandava army, but you trained him in the military science. So just see, what is this ungrateful person? So in this way, he's ensuring that Drona will become very much enthusiastic to fight very vehemently against the Pandava soldiers, and not be influenced by affection for Arjuna, who was his dearest disciple. Prabhupada actually comments about this nature of Duryodhana, a very liberal nature of a Brahmin, and this is the ideal nature of a Brahmin. In the purports, Prabhupada gives the example of the sun, which shines everywhere, in everyone's courtyard, regardless of whether the person is a sinful person or a pious person. This is a liberal nature of the sun. Similarly, the Brahmin will give transcendental knowledge. That's the duty to any inquiring student, regardless of circumstances that may lead to, which may not be favorable for that Brahmin. But they're not concerned with that. The Brahmin is concerned with giving transcendental knowledge. And in this way, Drona is considered an ideal Brahmin. Prabhupada comments, Dronacharya knew that Drupad Maharaj has got his son. In the future, he would kill me. Still, when he was offered to become his disciple to learn military art, he accepted, yes. That means the Brahmanas were so liberal. When he is coming as my disciple, never mind. He would kill me in the future. That doesn't matter, but I must give him teaching. In text 4, here in this army are many great heroic bowmen, equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjuna, great fighters like Duryodhana, Virat and Draupad. The Prabhupada's commenting on the names mentioned here. He mentions particularly Bhima and Arjuna because they were such formidable foes. Arjuna was able to go to the heavenly planets and acquire these celestial weapons from Lord Shiva. Pashupati Astra. He defeated Lord Shiva in battle. He defeated the demons as they were fighting the demigods. He's the son of Indradev. And Bhima, well, Bhima took a very ferocious vow, a very terrific vow at the time of the disrobing of Draupadi. And Duryodhana is reminding us of the danger of this person, Bhima, who had these vows. He vowed to break the thighs of Duryodhana, who showed his thighs to Draupadi and said, come and sit here. He vowed to tear off the arms of Dushashan that had touched the sanctified hair of Draupadi. And he vowed to split open the chest of Dushashan and tear out his heart and wash the hair of Draupadi with the blood of Dushashan. And Draupadi actually kept this vow. She didn't tie her hair again until Bhima came, having torn open the chest of Dushashan and his hands covered in the blood of Dushashan, and he shampooed Draupadi's hair with that. And he also vowed to kill all of the sons of Dhritarashtra. So these very severe vows, to break Duryodhana's thighs, to rip off the arms of Dushashan, to split open his chest, pull out his heart, drink his blood, and kill all the sons of Dhritarashtra. And Bhima, at the time of making that vow, he said that, let it be known, I stand here before all the great valiant kings. If I am unable to fulfill these vows, then my ancestors will not be able to attain the ultimate abodes and the heavenly realms. So this is a very serious thing, particularly in the previous ages when a Kshatriya would give a vow then maintaining that vow becomes the most important mission in their life, more important than anything else. So these vows that Bhima made were very, very serious. And Duryodhana, he's reminding the soldiers of the serious combatant they're facing, Bhima.
Text number 8. Bhavan Bhishmascha Karnascha Kripa Cha Shamitim Jaya Ashvatama Vikarnascha Shomadata Tataiva Cha. Interesting that here Duryodhana first of all refers to Drona. There are personalities like you as Drona, Bhishma, Karna, Kripa, Ashvatama, Vikarna, the son of Somadatta, were very victorious in battle. He's particularly mentioning some of the great heroes present there to further inspire them. And it's interesting that although Bhishma is the general of the army and should be shown respect, first of all he mentions Drona because Drona is a Brahmin. So Bhishma, of course, would understand that the Brahmin should be mentioned first. So you, Bhishma, and then other great Maharatis are mentioned, Karna and Kripa, the relatives of Drona, Ashvatama, the son of Drona. Interesting that he mentions Vikarna. Vikarna was one of Duryodhana's brothers who was somewhat a little bit doubtful because he protested at the time of Draupadi being disrobed. So he's mentioning him, even though he's not considered one of the great Maharatis, but he's mentioning him to somewhat flatter him and in that way ensure his support. Of course, in the Vedic fight, there is the opportunity, and Yudhishthira actually he called at the beginning of the fight that all you great soldiers present here who all stand firmly for virtue and righteousness, anyone who wants to join our army now, you can come and join. So it was not an uncommon thing in the beginning of these dharmic battles in the Vedic times. There would be exchange of the soldiers according to which army they felt was more righteous. The great Kshatriyas would move from one army to the other, and once the battle began, then they would remain with that army. And we hear many soldiers on the Kaurava side being unsatisfied with the leadership of Duryodhana and inspired by the great virtue and religious qualities of the great highly principled leader Yudhishthira. Many of the warriors joined Yudhishthira's army at the beginning of the battle. Of course, we may consider, well, shouldn't we be chanting Hare Krishna and doing sadhana, and here we're getting into such political topics. Is this appropriate for Krishna-conscious devotees? Well, Prabhupada comments, people may ask, by mentioning these great fighters, what spiritual progress we make, because we are meant for chanting Hare Krishna, Mahamantra. So by chanting the names of these great fighters, what do we gain? This question may be raised there. But the thing is that Nirvana Krishna Sambandhe, whenever there is connection with Krishna, that it also becomes Krishna. So these warriors, name mentioning, we should not neglect. Krishna ordered to gather all the demonic power on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and kill them. That was his plan. Srila Prabhupada Ki. So regarding not neglecting these early verses of the Bhagavad Gita, you'll find in 1973 in London, Prabhupada, he lectured on the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, every verse. And all of these verses you can read full lectures on. And verses 14 to 20 go on to indicate various signs of victory for the Pandavas. There is Madhav, the lord of the goddess of fortune, present there on the chariot. Dibya Shankho, when the sounding of the conches were heard, the sound of Arjuna and Krishna's conches are described as Dibyam, as transcendental. The chariot of Agni, which was given to Arjuna. Of course, that chariot was so special that it was protected, Krishna being on that chariot. So many astras, weapons, were let loose by the Kaurava army on the chariot and struck the chariot of Arjuna. But because Krishna was present there, the weapons were unable to damage the chariot. Finally, at the end of the battle, it is interesting that Krishna told Arjuna to get down off the chariot before he stepped off the chariot. Arjuna was off the chariot, and then when Krishna, he took his lotus foot from the chariot and he alighted, and at that moment, boom, the whole chariot just turned into ashes as a result of all of the weapons, all of the different curses that had been thrown against the chariot, which were being held off because of Krishna's lotus feet, which were touching that chariot. So a very special chariot. Kapidwaja, on the chariot of Arjuna, was the flag of Hanumanji. And it's very interesting, there is a history as to how Hanuman appeared on the chariot, on the flag of Arjuna, Kapidwaja. When the Pandavas were in Bhadrag Ashram, as they were touring the Himalayas, actually the Pandavas, they revived the temple worship of Badri Narayan and Mahadev at Kedarnath and Badrinath. Those ancient temples there were first built by the Pandavas. So when the Pandavas were in Bhadrag Ashram, as Alaknanda comes pouring down beside the Badri Vishal temple, the beautiful Alaknanda Ganga, the Himalayan stream, 1,000 petaled lotus flower was floating in Alaknanda Ganga, and seeing that, Draupadi was enchanted. And she took that flower, she approached Bhima, and she said, "Such a beautiful flower, I would like to offer to Yudhishthira. Can you bring more?" And immediately being inspired by the requests of his wife, as a very dutiful husband would respond, Bhima enthusiastically, he headed up to the higher regions of the Himalayas looking for more of the 1,000-petaled lotus. And he was tearing through the jungle and up mountains and throwing boulders away, cracking boulders and uprooting trees, as he was very enthusiastic to fulfill this request of Draupadi. Upon reaching the higher realms in the Himalayas, he saw a huge monkey lying on the path. And he asked that monkey to move aside. And the monkey said, "I'm so tired, I'm not moving anywhere, just step over me." Bhima was not so inclined to step over the monkey, because as Rupa Goswami explains in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in the Shadana Angasa items of Sadhana Bhakti, the Pranamatre, Manodbhakya, Udveganadiva, Pranamatra, even a very insignificant living entity. Manobhakya, not either by our words or by our mind. Udveganadiva, should we act in a way to disturb even a very insignificant living entity. So he didn't want to disrespect that monkey by jumping over him. He asked the monkey, "Just move your tail and I'll go around." The monkey said, "Yeah, I'm too tired. You move my tail." So Bhima, when he trying to move the tail of that monkey, he couldn't move. He's astonished. "How is it? I'm the great Bhima, the strength of 10,000 elephants. I can't move the monkey." He recognized that only someone with equal strength to me would be able to perform such a feat. He recognized the monkey must be Hanuman, his brother, as they were both the celestial sons of the wind god Vayu. So recognizing his brother Hanuman, Bhima showed great respect. And at that time Hanuman blessed Bhima that when you are on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and you are killing the sons of Dhritarashtra, actually regarding those vows we mentioned earlier, that the other Pandavas, even when they had opportunity to kill any of Dhritarashtra's sons, 100 sons, they refrained from that, so that Bhima would be able to fulfill his vow. And Bhima did fulfill his vow, and he did kill 100 sons of Dhritarashtra. So at that time Hanuman mentioned that when you are tearing open the chest and splitting the heads of the sons of Dhritarashtra, drinking their blood, at that time I will roar along with you on the battlefield. And when Bhima would tear apart the bodies of the sons of Dhritarashtra, who are all actually Rakshasas incarnated, and he would tear their limbs off and then drink their blood, standing on the battlefield, the great warrior, and this struck so much terror, and he would roar, and the Kaurava warriors would see this ferocious warrior as he's tearing up the bodies of the great generals, drinking their blood, roaring. Even it terrified the warriors on the Pandu army, what to speak of the Kaurava army. And Hanuman mentioned also that I will also reside on the flag of Arjuna's chariot, and in this way, my presence, you will have my association. And Prabhupada's commenting about the nature of a Vaishnava is to take shelter of the previous Acharyas. So in the fighting principle, Arjuna is fighting for Krishna. He is following the previous fighting Acharya Hanumanji. Therefore, he has depicted his flag with Hanuman. That Hanumanji, Bajrangaji, kindly help me. This is Vaishnavism. I have come here to fight for Lord Krishna. And you fought also for the Lord. Kindly help me. That is the idea. Kapidwaj. So any activities of the Vaishnava, they should always pray to the previous Acharya. Kindly help me. Kindly. This is Vaishnava. Vaishnava is always thinking himself helpless and begging help from the previous Acharya. The topic under discussion here is the Battle of Kurukshetra, we'll see the discussion between Arjuna and Krishna based around the issue of fighting. And the topic has many angles which need to be clearly understood. How is it possible, the issue here that we're going to be looking at over the next few lessons is how is it possible that Lord Krishna, who is all loving and full of mercy, is actually so determined to induce Arjuna to fight in the battle? And how is it that the Vaishnava should actually be involved in these political intrigues? This seems to be somewhat of a compromise from the spiritual standards, where one should be detached from politics, etc. So this has to be understood very clearly, and this is a very central theme of the Bhagavad Gita, which we'll be examining over the next few lessons. Prabhupada's commenting, there are two missions, not only to give protection to the devotees, but also to kill the demons. So the devotees of Krishna should be trained up both ways, not only to give protection to the devotees, to give them encouragement, but if need be, they should be prepared to kill the demons. This is Vaishnavism. Taken on face value, one may misunderstand Prabhupada's comment here and think this is some type of legitimization of militaristic activities amongst the followers of Srila Prabhupada. This is not exactly how we should understand the statement here. Basically because in addition to the principles of spiritual life and our eternal Sanatana Dharma, we also need to follow Sanatana Dharma in consideration of the loka vichar, or the considerations of the social environment, the legal environment, the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and this can't be completely ignored. Rupa Goswami also explains in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that one should deal with the material world as much as necessary, not overly absorb oneself in the material world, and not be overly negligent also. So because, and particularly in these modern times, if we were to function in this way and engage in militaristic activity, then that would be detrimental for the spreading of Krishna consciousness movement, as it would cause a lot of trouble legally for our movement, and perhaps we could be prevented in many cases being somewhat of an extremist type of a movement, and that would be unfavorable for spreading Krishna consciousness. So this is not an activity that we are particularly promoting. The devotees should be prepared and training themselves to kill the demons. Rather, we spread Krishna consciousness in a very compassionate way, and we don't engage in political or other type of violent activities. However, in principle, the devotee is prepared to do anything that Krishna wants. And we'll see that because Krishna desired the battle, and we'll see how is it that Krishna desired the battle, because ultimately beneficial for everyone involved. And in that way, the devotee is prepared to do whatever Krishna wants. Prabhupada continues. Generally, a Vaishnava is non-violent. Just like Arjuna. In the beginning, he was non-violent. He said, Krishna, what is the use of this fighting? Let them enjoy. So by nature, he was non-violent. But he was induced by Krishna to become violent. Your non-violence will not help. You become violent, I kill them. You become violent, you kill them, I want it. So if Krishna wants, we shall be prepared to become violent. This is a principle. We'll do whatever Krishna wants, and we know that that is the highest principle of religion. So those who are devotees of Krishna, they should be trained up both ways. They should be prepared, but generally there's no question of becoming violent unnecessarily. Of course, if the devotees are attacked, if the temple is attacked, if they're in that way a great threat, then naturally the devotee must take all means to protect the devotees and protect the interest of the Lord. And if that requires violence to do that, then the devotee shouldn't be averse to doing that. In texts 21 and 22, we see Lord Sri Krishna first appearing in the Bhagavad Gita. And it's very interesting, the moment that Krishna appears, he is serving his devotee. Arjuna uvacha, Shenayo ubayo madhye radam shtapaya me chuta yavadetan niriksheham jutakamam avashtitan. Arjuna he's actually ordering Krishna. Arjuna uvacha, Shenayo ubayo madhye, between the two armies, Ratam Shtapaya Mechuta. Hey Achyuta, you place the chariot between the two armies so I can see all of those who have assembled here. Prabhupada's commenting in the purport the significance of this incident, where the devotee, who's the insignificant subordinate of the Lord, he's actually ordering the Lord. Now, how is it possible? This is possible because Arjuna's relationship is a special type of relationship. It's called prema bhakti. And particularly in this type of relationship with Krishna, one is not so much concerned about the formal position of Krishna and his opulence as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Arjuna is relating to Krishna directly as a friend. And later in the 4th chapter, Krishna himself, he acknowledges Arjuna's position as his friend. Bhakto shime shakacheti rahasham hi etad uttamam. Because you're my devotee, shaka, and my friend, you can understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Prabhupada's commenting in the purport. The relationship between the Lord and his servitor is very sweet and transcendental. The servitor is always ready to render service to the Lord, and similarly the Lord is always seeking an opportunity to render some service to his devotee. He takes greater pleasure in his pure devotee assuming the advantageous position of ordering him than he does in being the giver of orders. Prabhupada told a story in this connection about Prime Minister Gladstone, who was the Prime Minister of England when Prabhupada was a young youth, before Churchill, before the Second World War. Prabhupada wasn't a young youth, he was a young man. Prime Minister Gladstone, the Prime Minister of England prior to Churchill, when Prabhupada was a young man. So Prabhupada heard this story about the Prime Minister of England, that the ambassador from Germany had come and was waiting outside his office. And the secretary mentioned German ambassador has come. It was a very important meeting. Actually, they were on the brink of a world war. And Gladstone was saying, yeah, okay, just wait. So the ambassador is sitting and he's waiting and looking at his clock, looking at his watch, and sitting and waiting a long time, 40 minutes, 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Eventually he kept saying to the secretary, how long? And the secretary was saying, just now coming in.
He couldn't wait any longer. And he went and he opened the door of the Prime Minister's office and he saw Prime Minister Gladstone down on his hands and knees on the floor of his office, imitating a horse. And sitting on his back was his grandson, who had a stick in his hand, and he was smacking the Prime Minister on the rear end, saying, "Giddy up, giddy up." And the Prime Minister in this way was enjoying playing as a horse with his grandson. So this is very relishable, because all of the official work and the policies and the diplomacy, etc., is quite a headache. And when he gets a chance to forget all that and just play, he actually enjoys that more. Prabhupada's using this example to describe to us the nature of Lord Shri Krishna, that Majtani Sarva Bhutani, even though the entire world is resting in him and he's completely in control of everything, na chaham teshu avashtitaha. He's actually not in the material world. He's not so much involved in the material world. Krishna is completely absorbed in reciprocating as Braja Bihari, enjoying in Vrindavan with his devotees. And this relationship between Arjuna and Krishna is such a relationship, Gaurava Shakya Prema. Actually, interesting that later, when Arjuna saw the universal form of Krishna, here Arjuna is considering Krishna like his friend. Later, when Krishna displays the universal form to Arjuna in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, then Arjuna at that time, he's commenting there that he regretted the intimate behavior. We sat on the same bed together. We ate together. We spoke like equals. Sometimes I boasted in front of you. Oh, please forgive me. Forgetting your opulence, I behaved with you in such an intimate way. But actually, Krishna likes this type of relationship. Of course, Arjuna's unique position is that he fluctuates, sometimes understanding the opulence of the Lord as the supreme controller, and sometimes forgetting that and just dealing with the Lord as a friend. And you can see different occasions where different mood will be there. Prabhupada explains in his purports to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela, chapter 19, where Mahaprabhu is instructing Rupa Goswami in the Rasa Tattva. Mahaprabhu gives this example of Arjuna, comparing it to Vrindavan, the love of the residents of Vrindavan, that even though Krishna displays his opulence, their intimacy is never interrupted. Kevala Shuddha Prem, Arshajana Janle, Arshaja Dekleo, nija shambanda shemane. Aisharja dekleo, in the case of Krishna demonstrating his opulence to Maya Jasoda and showing the universal form within his mouth. Momentarily, Maya Jasoda is thinking philosophical, some thoughts philosophically, and then she immediately, snap out of a woman. You're here with your baby, is your son, you have to feed him, you have to dress him. Even though Krishna shows his opulence, the Brajabasis, they never consider him God, because they're so much merged in their love for Krishna as the Gopal, the cowherd boy, Nanda Dulal. Iti driksalelabe ananda kunde swago shamnima jantam akyapayantam. Tadi yeshita gyeshu bhakte chitatum. The Tadi yeshita, those who are worshipping the Lord, understanding his opulence, bhakte chitatum. In this Damodar Leela, we are seeing that Krishna is actually conquered by love and affection rather than reverence. And these interesting points are introduced very early in the study of Bhagavad Gita. In our first session today, we were discussing the situation on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Duryodhana's diplomacy, and the signs of victory for the Pandavas, and we also discussed some very significant comments Srila Prabhupada makes in his preface to Bhagavad Gita as it is, which revealed his broad mission for spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, and the role that Bhagavad Gita as it is plays in the fulfillment of Srila Prabhupada's mission. In our next session, we'll be concluding the first chapter, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. And we can conclude with this comment from Prabhupada. If one adopts the principles enunciated in Bhagavad Gita, he can make his life perfect and make a permanent solution to all the problems of life. This is the sum and substance of the entire Bhagavad Gita. Srila Prabhupada ki